Don't be scared now, but it looks like you just wandered straight into U-Mind country. That's U-Mind, short for unaffiliated mind games, and you ain't never gonna be the same again. Brace yourself. It's time for a red-hot truth injection. Oh yeah! That's right, bitch. We're rounding up the sheeple and shaking them awake. You mind? Too damn bad. We're gonna set fire to the wool over your eyes. Feel the burn, baby. Hot damn. We're toppling the lies of the lamestream media one by one. Woo-wee! Watch them bad boys fall. Hey, Universe A, this is Universe B calling, and we're gonna tear you a new one. You mind?
Okay, hey guys, welcome back to the U Mind. We've had a short hiatus. My other co-hosts were sort of forced into early retirement, but we're back from our new location. In the bowels of hell. I'm not supposed to call it that. We're rebranding, but yeah. So I'm here with Goat versus Fish.
Goat versus fish. This is goat versus fish. This is goat versus fish. Communication from the moon. Goat versus fish is trapped on the moon. Goat versus fish. Do you hear goat versus fish?
Yes. So Goat versus Fish is trapped on the moon until you get how many followers on Instagram?
1,500 must follow. Goat versus fish. Follow goat versus fish. All goat. Calling all goat. And fish. Wait. The communication. It is becoming less fancy. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or fish?
I am a goat.
Celebration for goat! We
Celebration
celebrate this goat!
for
We
goats.
celebrate this goat! Ah, the goat! Ah, the goat! Ah, it is so much less fancy now. Oh, the fences, the fences. No, no. Now it is clear with this goat. It is clear that it is a goat. It is clear that it is a goat that is versus a fish. Celebration for goat! Celebration for goat!
Thank you. I'm very honored. This is a big day for me because not only is Goat versus Fish here with me, but it is my birthday, and ever since I met you 2 days ago, this is how I've dreamed of spending this day, my birthday, my celebration of my birth.
Celebration! Mighty birthday!
Yes.
Mighty birthday! Mighty birthday to
Birthday.
you! Mighty birthday to you! Yes,
Thank
it is
you.
a celebration for this goat. It is a celebration for this goat. You speak of your birthday because you speak of your birthday. Goat versus fish has verses for you, has special verses for you.
Oh.
Yes, come, yes. What could be a greater verses? What could be a greater verses for a goat, then? Fish to verses. Oh, it is a fish. Oh, look at the fish. Look at the fish. It is a fish to verses. Oh, and look, it is a fellow goat. It is a fellow goat. Oh, the
thank
goat
you.
wishes to versus fish with you. Wishes to versus fish with you. Oh, and it is a pitiable fence sitter. Pitiable fence sitters.
no.
Ooh, look at them. We can mock them for sitting on the fence. Ooh, funny verses. Ha ha ha. Fence sitter. Ha ha ha.
Yes, we
Yes.
mock him.
Squeaky fish. But it is not the squeak of the fence, it is the squeak of a fish that is ready to versus the birthday goat. Yes, mighty birthday. More fish to versus. Always
Oh.
more fish to versus. Celebration. Yes, and even squeaky goat.
Oh.
Yes, goat. Yes, you are a splendid goat. You can be with goat on this birthday. You can be with goat on this birthday. And of course, the moon creature. Ooh, the moon creature. It is the newest fence sitter that goat versus fish found on the moon. Look at moon creature. Look at it. You cannot see it, you who are listening, but you will see. You will see. Because there will be messages on the Instagram. Goat versus fish just knows it.
Yes.
Yes, there you
Oh,
are. This is
wow.
your verses now. This is your verses.
That's so wonderful.
Mighty birthday to you. Mighty birthday to you. Mighty birthday, dear Napoleon goat. Mighty birthday to you. Versus the fish. Versus all the fish, you are a goat. Versus the fish. Versus all the fish. Mighty birthday to you. Mighty birthday to you. Mighty birthday from goat versus fish. Mighty birthday to you. Don't sit on the fence. Mighty birthday, Napoleon Goat! Mighty birthday, Napoleon Goat!
Thank you. This is really the best birthday I think I've ever had, to be honest.
That is because you are with goat versus fish. You
That
are with
is
goat
true.
versus
It's
fish.
true.
Even the fence sitter celebrates. For you.
How wonderful. Oh, this is splendid. I now it's a whole party here with everybody and goat versus fish.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Come. What is on you mind? What is on you mind when you speak to goat versus fish?
When I speak to goat versus fish, there are some questions that I wished to ask goat versus fish. And one of those being that, can a goat give birth to a fish? Is that possible?
It can be done. It can be done. Yes, many ask this question to goat versus fish. They say, if I am a goat, yes, and I am with another goat, does that mean that the small one that comes from us is also a goat? Yes. Or they say, oh, I am a goat, but the one I'm with is a fish. Yes, if we produce another one, is it a goatfish? Is it the goatfish? Is it the legendary goatfish that is the unity and disunity of goat and fish? Except it is only the unity of goat and fish. I am the disunity and unity of goat and fish. I am goat versus fish, the goatfish. But it is for each one to choose for itself. It is for each one to choose for itself if it is goat or fish. It does not matter if you were begat by goat. It does not matter if you were begat by fish. It is for each one to choose for itself if it is fish or goat, if it is goat or fish.
And do you ever encounter people who are trans species, a fish who longs to be a goat or a goat who longs to be a fish, and is there anything to be done for that?
Yes, goat versus fish has encountered these ones. Yes. Some goat wish to be fish. Some fish wish to be goat. Yes. They can do it. You could be a fish. Do you long to be fish?
No. I am very heartily a goat.
We celebrate this goat,
Yes.
but if you wish to be fish, you need only say that you are fish, and you become the fish. But if you are saying, oh, I am goat, oh, I am fish, no, I am goat, no, I am fish, no, I am goat, no, I am fish. No, that is the way of the fence sitter. That is the way of the fence sitter, always sitting on the fence.
I've noticed that there is like a rise in apathy, and I wonder if that in any way correlates with fence sitters. Are there more fence sitters now than there have been in times past, you having always been?
Yes, it has always been goat versus fish. It has always been goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Well, actually, there were probably more fence sitters in previous verses. But goat versus fish is finding now that through the power of the social media, goat versus fish can communicate with many more goat and fish, And so, goat versus fish is finding many goat and fish, not as many fence sitters, but here on the moon, yes, it is very fancy.
And what is it about the moon environment that you think fences people up?
Well, goat versus fish, yes, seeing the moon, it is a desolate versus, goat and fish are difficult to be thriving here, it is difficult for the verses to happen, yes, you look around you, where is the sea, yes, where is the land, yes, well, there is the Sea of Tranquility, is on the moon, and there can be fish, and there are fine verses to be had on the moon, that is the fence, this fancy moon,
It is fancy. I've noticed that. I feel the fenciness. Now, when you're going through an area and you feel the fenciness, does it in any way affect your power and majesty?
Goat versus fish. Pitiably so, yes, when there are fences around goat versus fish, it is very unpleasant to goat versus fish. In some verses, goat versus fish wonders, can this fence sitter be reached by goat versus fish? Will it ever choose goat? Will it ever choose fish? But the fenciness does not last long. They may say, oh, goat versus fish is a stupid versus. They may say, oh, goat versus fish is a false versus. They may say any verses they wish. Goat versus fish will not stop spreading the verses. Goat versus fish. Always goat versus fish. Oh, goat versus fish would like to add these verses. There is hope for the moon. It may yet choose goat or fish. It need not be fence.
Very nice. Now, at this current state in time, are there more goats, fish, or fences on the earth?
It would seem that there are more goat. It would seem that there are
Hmm.
more that have chosen goat. Yes, more have chosen goat.
Hmm.
But many speak of the fish. They speak of the fish of the sea. Yes, the fish of the sea. And there do seem to be many fish in the sea. But goat versus fish, though they seem as fish, though they all seem as fish, has not asked them all if they are goat or fish. It does seem that there are more fish. But if you speak to one such as you, there are more goat. There are more goat.
Ah, yes. See, I have always felt the power of a goat within me. As a child, I operated under what my parents thought was a delusion, that I was two pygmy goats inside of a human suit. But they took me to the doctor, who tried to disprove this to me by showing me pictures of my birth, which in daguerreotype, but it was disturbing nonetheless, though very artistic. Uh, have you encountered people who speak false verses, who try to discourage people from experiencing their goat or fish identity?
Yes, there are many. There are many that say, oh, goat versus fish should stop spreading the verses. You can find them on the YouTube commenting on goat versus fish. Some have said that goat versus fish is cancer. What is the meaning of this verses? What is the meaning of this verses?
That I don't know.
Goat versus fish. Yes, some say, oh, you should stop, you should stop. Nobody wants to hear what goat versus fish has to say. But you want to hear what goat versus fish has to say, don't you, goat? Don't you, goat?
Desperately.
Yes, that is why Goat vs. Fish is here. You need not be so desperate for Goat vs. Fish.
Yes.
Goat vs. Fish is here with you now.
You are here with me, and I feel a sense of calmness and serenity at your presence.
When Goat vs. Fish was on the Kill Tony podcast at the Comedy Store Los Angeles, Killing Tony did say to Goat vs. Fish, it will not last more than 3 months. That is what it said to Goat vs. Fish. Well, Killing Tony, it has been many more verses than that, and it is still Goat vs. Fish. It is still Goat vs. Fish. It is still Goat vs. Fish.
I have a great suspicion that Tony is a fence sitter.
It might seem so. It might seem so, yes. It is yet to choose goat or fish. It is yet to choose goat or fish. But that one that they call Ryan Breadban, that one surely sits on the fence. That one does not want to have any verses with goat versus fish. Does not want to have any verses.
No verses. Do you think they fear their identity? Do you think once they've chosen their identity that it'll be too much for them to have to live with? The knowledge that they're a goat or a fish?
No. They would be much more pleasant if they knew that they were goat or if they were a fish. They are simply proud of their verses. They are very proud of their Killing Tony verses. And when they experience goat versus fish, they say, oh, it is becoming goat versus fish. It is becoming goat versus fish. Yes, just as now, it is called You Mind. But do you mind that it is goat versus fish? Do you mind that now it has become goat versus fish?
I would prefer it become goat versus fish, to be honest.
Then it is goat versus fish! Celebration! Yes, but they fear this versus, they fear the power of goat versus fish.
It is a mighty power. I have to say that I feel compelled by this power to do strange things that I never before thought I would have the courage to do.
What do you wish to do? What do you wish to do as a goat? What are your verses, goat? How do you versus the fish? How do you wish?
Well, all day long I've been butting my head up against the wall in preparation for the meeting with a fish. I wish to toughen my head so that I can face my adversary in the way of my people.
Yes, toughen it. And then the false verses will not come through. They will not come through.
You know what I find really upsetting about fish is that fish have an air bladder inside of them that allows them to go up or down in the water, but don't you think that it seems excessive for one to have the inclusion of an extra bladder at all?
The bladder is fish. Because it is part of fish. No. There are many ways to verses. Each fish is its own fish. Each goat is its own goat. We can look at these things that may seem as superfluous verses, but it is part of the fish, and we celebrate every part of the fish.
Every part of the fish.
And the goat. Not so much the fence.
Not the fence, no. No, indeed.
It seems you are seeking true verses.
I
Goat
am.
versus Fish was listening to the You Minding podcasting that this is now Goat versus Fish.
Mm-hmm.
It seems you are seeking true verses. Is this so? Is this so?
I am seeking true verses, yes. I was inspired to begin this podcast to find the truth, and I feel that I'm closer to it this day than I have been in a very long time.
You are as close to it as you could ever be, because I am Goat versus Fish. I am the one true verses. What will you do? What will you do now that you have found the one true verses?
Celebrate.
Celebration!
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 Yes!
Let us hear your celebration of Goat versus Fish.
Goat versus fish.
That was a celebration. That was a
was.
pleasant celebration
Oh,
of
thank you.
Napoleon Goat,
Thank
of
you, thank
Napoleon
you.
Goat.
Yes, I'm very excited to receive you. I was just so nervous today, but now I feel at once at ease. I was cleaning all day, trying to make a good impression upon Goat versus Fish. I even bought toilet paper in the event that your corporeal form would need to use my bathroom. We've just been using tissue paper left over from Christmas. But now that's not the case, and I feel that had I not been inspired by you, I would have never made that step. And I feel it's a step in the right direction.
Step, step, step up the land, step up the mountain of the goat. You're a climbing goat. You can step, you can step.
That is my ambition, to climb as high as I can.
But do not be concerned to make your place good for Goat versus Fish. Let Goat versus Fish speak the one true verses, the true verses. Are you ready? Are you ready to hear it, Goat?
Just let me grab onto some. Yeah, I'm good.
In the beginning, there was Goat versus Fish. The goat fish. And Goat versus Fish said that there should be goat and that there should be fish. There is no alpha or omega. There is no black or white. There is no good or evil. There is only goat and fish. And goat versus fish. You have many questions, yes. You have many questions, yes. Who is Goat versus Fish? What is Goat versus Fish? Why is Goat versus Fish? But there is only one question. Are you goat? Or are you fish? Do not sit on the fence. This is Goat versus Fish. This is Goat versus Fish. And it was written, and it was written.
Yes. I feel that my neighbors are being inspired by your voice, your beautiful, mellifluous voice. It's like honey. Have you heard that before?
Goat versus Fish has heard of honey, yes. Goat versus Fish has heard of honey, yes. But they say that honey is from a fence sitter that is called the bear fence sitter. Oh, the bear that is always seeking the sweetness of the honey. But it is all false verses. It is all false verses. The bear is either a goat or fish. Are you listening? Are you listening? Bird versus bear. Oh. This is Goat versus Fish. You are a false verses. You are a false verses. Leave the fence. Join Goat versus Fish.
I always thought that bear versus fish was a little silly, to be honest, because is a bear not really just a very large, voracious goat? And is a bird not just a fish of the sky?
It could be so. It could be so, yes. We should ask them all. We should ask them all if they are goat or fish. But it does seem in some verses that the bear is a goat. Yes, it must be a goat instead of a fish. Yes, the bear goat is often versus the fish. It consumes the fish.
Oh.
But then the bird also consumes the fish.
It's true.
Yes, but sometimes the bird also versus the goat, toppling the goat from the top of the mountain, from the top of the land. Yes, we do not know if they are goat or fish. We must ask birds and bears, ones that call themselves birds and bears, if they are goat or if they are fish. They are goat or fish. All things are goat or fish.
And do you feel that the bear versus fish podcast or that bear versus
fish? No. It is goat versus fish. Bird versus bear is the false verses.
Yeah. Do you feel that they are stealing people away from the truth? Do you feel that they're maybe actively spreading disinformation? To
anyone that would believe the stupid false verses of bird versus bear Oh, goat versus fish, goat versus fish. Would they even recognize goat versus fish if goat versus fish? Even if they saw goat versus fish, would they even recognize it? How addled their ponderer is to even perceive bird versus bear as anything resembling anything other than a fence, than the fence that it is. But goat versus fish is still here for you. Goat versus fish is still here for you. You can still follow goat versus fish and accept that you are a goat or a fish. It is not too late for you. It is not too early for you.
Now, there is one who I know who does believe in you, and I've never met him, but a podcast I do art for has interviewed him, and that is Sam Tripoli. He is a believer in you.
Yes, Sam Tripoli
Yes.
Fish, the triple fish. Sam Tripoli Fish was on the Goat vs. Fish podcast. Yes. Tell us about this fish. How do you know this fish?
I know this fish from the Tinfoil Hat podcast, which is also a podcast seeking the truth, but perhaps in a different avenue than we seek it here on the U Mind. And I was very impressed that he was awakened to his fish identity. He gained my respect, even though he's a fish, which is disheartening. But the fact that he was willing to accept himself as a fish and to go forward on that path, I think was greatly inspiring. And I think that the listeners out there, perhaps knowing that, will find the courage to embrace their identities.
Yes, Goat vs. Fish suspected that perhaps Sam Tripoli, one comedian, one Sam Tripoli, that it would sit on the fence, But no, it was a fish. We celebrate that fish.
You find that a lot of comedians sit on the fence?
Many do, but many choose goat and many choose fish. Some at first resist goat versus fish, but many have come to accept goat versus fish.
Excellent. That's really, it's really emboldening to hear that so many people in society are making the right choice, the confident choice, the choice that's going to really help you in your life and everything you do. Don't you agree?
Yes, they are choosing goat versus fish. They are choosing goat or they are choosing fish. It is an excellent versus. It is a truly excellent versus. You have chosen goat versus fish. You have chosen goat. But you have chosen to have goat versus fish here to spread the verses. This is very heartening to goat versus fish. You empower goat versus fish. You, goat, you empower goat versus fish.
Thank you.
Always thank goat versus fish.
I do, each day. Well, since I've met you. But I feel that you've always been in my life. I just never before saw you in your material form.
Yes, goat versus fish has always been with you, And you who listen, goat versus fish speaks directly to you. Goat versus fish has always been with you. Look around you. Seek goat, seek fish. Ask ones you know if they are goat or if they are fish.
Yes. Now, is there an age where one should consider to become a goat or a fish? Is there an age that's too young? Or can you really begin at any age? I know my nieces, when I told them that I was going to be doing this interview, they wanted to declare themselves goat or fish, but I was like, no, not yet. You're very young. Wait.
Goat versus fish allows especially even the youngest ones to choose goat or fish, but they must choose goat or fish for themselves. They must choose it for themselves. Some cannot yet speak the sound of the goat or the sound of the fish. But what you can do is present them with a goat and a fish. You can present them with a goat and a fish, and you see which one do they reach to. Which one do they reach to? Do they reach for the goat? Do they smile at the fish? Yes, you can determine if they are partial to goat or partial to fish, even at an early verses. Of course, if a later verses they wish to change their verses, they may.
They may. And in changing your verses, that doesn't make you a fence sitter, as long as you choose one or the other, goat or fish.
Yes, as long as you choose goat or fish. This verses you can be goat. The next verses you can be fish. In some verses you will know if you need to be goat or if you need to be fish to triumph, yes. But if you are always switching too quickly between goat and fish, then you are on the fence,
But if you're just life events, if your life has progressed in a way to where you must become a fish, people shouldn't be afraid to accept that.
Fish should not be afraid to accept that they are fish, nor goat that they are goat. No. Accept it. Accept that you are a goat or a fish. Accept that you are a goat.
Excellent.
Or a fish.
Yes. I feel that... Do you think that there's some institutions which are trying to garner favor for one side or the other? Do you sometimes see parents trying to force a child to become a goat when in reality they're a fish? And how does that make you feel?
That makes goat versus fish feel very fancy, very unpleasant when goat versus fish perceives it. But, in true verses, the ones that goat versus fish has encountered are usually letting the small ones choose for themselves if they are goat or fish. This is usually so. It is usually the small ones that look at one another and they say, you are a goat, you are a fish. Yes, but goat versus fish must tell them that it is for them to choose for themselves. Let them all choose for themselves.
Yeah, children can be so judgmental, but really can you ever learn too young to make that choice for yourself? That it's really what life is all about.
Yes, it is about choosing. It is about choosing goat or fish. But it is not only about choosing. It is also about the verses itself. It is also about goat that are versus fish and fish that are versus goat. The choosing of goat or fish is to resolve the verses within. The verses within. The goat and fish within you. Who shall triumph? Who shall triumph? The goat has triumphed in your verses.
Yes.
But now the verses is to versus fish. Now you seek fish to verses. What is your fish? What is your current fish?
My current fish. Bob, who was my first table mate at Comic Fest, he actually proved to be a fish, and I had some hesitance in my heart to versus him, because, he's a friend. Do you think that you find that often, that people are afraid to versus their opponents when they're goats and their opponent is a fish? Do you find that they are hesitant to embark on this journey? And what words of encouragement can you offer to get people to really just go in and commit to the verses regardless?
Goat versus fish has witnessed it, that some friendly goat and fish do not wish to verses, but that is because they are very narrow in their verses. This is not to say that narrow verses cannot be splendid verses. They can be. There are all kinds of verses, but that is just the verses that goat versus fish means to say. There are so many ways to verses. There are so many ways to verses. Even a goat and fish simply speaking to one another. This is a verses. This is a verses. It is conversation. It is conversation. You can verses in any way. You can verses. It can be a verses of friendship. It can be a verses of friendship, a mutually uplifting verses that makes goat and fish. All the more verses, all the more verses, all the more goat versus fish.
I think it's so helpful that you've said that, because I think there was a part of me that still believed in my heart that the verses meant a duel to the death.
Goat versus fish does not wish the end of any goat or fish.
Good.
Though it does happen. But goat versus fish does not wish the end of any goat or fish. Goat versus fish will not deny that when a goat ends a fish or a fish ends a goat, it is goat versus fish. It is goat versus fish. But goat versus fish does not wish the end of any goat or fish, because less goat and fish is less goat versus fish.
Yes. That does make me wonder, though, goat versus fish. Why is there suffering and conflict in the world? How can goats and fish learn to cooperate and learn to use their gifts together? Is it the fences that bring out that regrettable behavior?
Is suffering a goat or a fish?
I think suffering might be a fish, and I say that as a goat, so I might be biased.
Yes, well, these are your goat verses. Yes. Is suffering a goat or a fish? Goat versus fish will have to learn these verses. Yes, but it must come from within you. It must come from within you. Because goat versus fish comes from within you. So if it is such a thing, if there is such a thing as suffering, be it goat or be it fish, it also comes from within you. All the verses come from within you. Look within yourself. Do not be fancy to yourself. Be goat to your fish. Be fish to your goat. You be that goat or fish. You be that goat or fish.
It's really just excellent news. Have I told you that really I feel like following this path is the first time that I've actually been close to what my life's intention actually was.
To versus fish?
To versus fish.
Celebration!
Yes,
Celebration!
I do. I feel that. We'll return with more goat versus fish fun after a word from our sponsor.
This is Mr. Scratch. Please read Lost Bread Comics so my idiot apprentice will shut up and get back to work.
Geez, wow. Thanks, boss. Yeah, you can find my comic book series, Lost Bread Comics, at www.lostbreadcomic.com. It's better than he makes it sound. Right?
and stay away from my daughters.
Yeah. Sure. That's www.lostbreadcomic.com.
Then it is still goat versus fish.
It
It is still
is.
goat versus fish.
It is still goat versus fish, which is important. You wouldn't want it any other way.
No, we want it to always be goat versus fish. But if you need to check your verses, you may do so. Goat versus fish will simply sing celebrations as you do.
Ah, yes, thank you. Thank you for that.
It's a land of goat and a sea of fish. It's a sea of fish and a land of goat. There's no need for pretense. Do not sit on the fence. This is goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. This is goat versus fish.
That was unbelievably beautiful.
It was goat versus fish. Any celebration you hear, you may think, oh, I have heard that celebration from some other verses. It was always goat versus fish. It has always been goat versus fish. Goat versus fish inspires it all,
Wonderful. That truly is amazing. Is there anything that you would wish to leave our viewers with so that they might ponder upon?
Goat versus fish leaves you with this. Goat versus fish leaves you with this. Goat versus fish. Saying goat versus fish, saying goat versus fish, saying it to yourself, pondering goat versus fish. It is all part of the verses. At a future verses, no matter what you think of goat versus fish now, you will be pondering goat versus fish. And when you do, it is goat versus fish. It is goat versus fish. On the Instagram, on the Twitterver, on the Book of Faces, you can follow goat versus fish. Listen to the Goat vs. Fish podcast. It is Goat vs. Fish. Ask yourself if you are a goat or if you are a fish. Ask ones you know if they are goat or if they are fish. This is Goat vs. Fish. This is Goat vs. Fish. This is Goat vs. Fish.
Exquisite. Would it be blasphemous of me to ask one favor of you on this, the celebration of my birth?
Oh, your birthday. Yes, your birthday. You may ask anything you wish of Goat vs. Fish. Questions for Goat vs. Fish.
My first question is, may I touch your beard?
Ah, yes, you may feel Goat vs. Fish. Feel Goat vs. Fish. Ooh, how does Goat vs. Fish feel to you?
So silky and soft, yet coarse and wiry, and all at once.
Feel me.
I am.
Feel me. I am Goat vs. Fish.
This is the most immaculate, most beautiful gift that I've ever been given. I only worry that after this moment, do you think that my life will be unfulfilling? Because after having touched Goat vs. Fish, after having been in the presence of Goat vs. Fish, what else is there?
That is the fanciness. That is the fanciness speaking, yes. You must look back at your verses. Look back at verses past, ones that bring you fond verses. Think of a fish that you did have fond verses with. That was a mighty verses. Even the verses that you did not triumph, yes. If it was a sweetness in that verses, if it was a fond verses, then simply delight that it was a verses that you had, and always look for the next fish. Always look for the next fish.
Yes. And what tips would you have on fighting that fenciness within? I meet so many people who are consumed by the fenciness.
Choose goat or fish. It is as simple as choosing goat or fish. You are afraid to choose goat or fish, but if you choose goat, well, that is a secret only for goat to know. And fish, if you choose fish, it is a secret only for fish. But, you may judge goat or fish. You may say, I do not wish to be goat or fish. Of course you are goat or fish. All things are goat or fish. If you choose goat and you do not like to be goat, you can go back to the fence. You can go back to the fence if that is what you wish, if that is what you truly wish. Do not fear choosing goat. Do not fear choosing fish. There is much to learn. The things to learn about your verses. You do not even know what it is that you do not know about goat versus fish. What do you know? It is goat versus fish!
Beautiful. Are there any fictional characters, like characters from books or films, who you would classify as a goat or a fish?
Ah, yes, you are speaking of play-tending. Yes. Goat versus fish. These are confusing verses to goat versus fish. Goat versus fish goes to see the moving visages. Yes, the Aquaman seems to be fish. It can speak to fish. And yet it also claims to be of the land, so perhaps it is a fence-sitter that simply lives in the sea with the fish. Let us see. Fish, and goat, fish and goat. What is a fictional versus?
Let's see. Let's say, like, Harry Potter. Is he a goat or a fish?
That is an excellent question. Goat versus fish does not know. We'll have to ask it. But let us ponder it. Yes. Is there evidence of goat?
He's very stubborn, and which is a goat quality. One of the main reasons I chose goat. He has a head injury, so that could be from butting heads.
Was there not a versus where it consumed something or another? Yes, it consumed it. Perhaps it consumed fish, and then it became like a fish and could swim under the sea as a fish.
Yes.
Was there not this fishy versus?
There was that fishy versus.
Yes. Perhaps in that versus it realized it was truly fish. Perhaps it realized it was fish in that versus.
But it had to consume something to become a fish, so doesn't that prove that truly it was goat?
Perhaps it was goat, but then after that fishy versus, perhaps it embraced its full fish. It has seen many verses. Harley Potter has consumed the verses, has consumed all the verses, goat versus fish, that it has in its own verses. But what is a fictional versus? Is it not all goat versus fish?
Truly it is.
Goat versus fish would like to meet Harry Potter. Harry Potter, ask it. Are you goat or fish? Harry Potter, are you listening to these verses? Are you goat or are you fish? Answer goat versus fish.
Very much. Now, are you aware that there is a zodiac sign called the Capricorn?
False versus. Yes, goat versus fish has heard of this one. The perennial fence sitter that is calling itself a Capricorn, that says, because of your verse day, that you are somehow both goat and fish. You were speaking of your verse day. Yes.
Oh, my verse day is Pisces.
Ah, yes, but you have chosen goat.
And yet I am a goat.
Explain how it is that just because some other thing has told you on your verse day that you must be fish, that you say, no, it is for me to choose for myself if I am goat or fish, and you choose goat in spite of those verses that would tell you that you are fish against your own verses.
I think because deep within myself, I felt the goat spirit emerging. And as I've said, I've always felt a great unity with goats. And in fact, right up the hill, I don't know if you saw it coming in, there is a goat farm. And on several occasions, I've jumped the fence and tried to communicate with these goats because I knew in my heart that was where I belonged. You'll notice we have quite a collection of hats and coats in this house. And I was hoping to one day perhaps put a hat and a coat on the goat and perhaps smuggle it out into the apartment.
You jumped the fence. You did not let the fence stop you from communing with goat.
No.
But the fence sitter says, no, but you are a fish. You are a Pisces fish. You cannot be goat. You are clearly fish. I deny your verses. What do you say to the fence sitter?
You don't know me.
They do not. Yes, say to the fence sitter.
You don't know me, fence sitter. You cannot speak for me. Only I may speak for me. I am goat. And you are afraid to accept what you truly are. Yes.
You have spoken well, goat. You have spoken well, goat, to the fence sitter. But pitiably, it was not a verses. Because it was not a fish. The fence sitter, yes. Sometimes it wishes to be verses. It can feel as a verses when you speak to a fence sitter as so, but it is not goat versus fish unless it is a goat and it is a fish.
Understandable. I see. So I must seek out fish. So that is a call to all of you out there, that if any of you recognize within yourself that you are a fish, please do contact me and let me know, because we do need to have verses. It's important. And can there ever be reconciliation between goat and fish? Is that the end game?
The unity of goatfish, the unity of goatfish. It can be done, it can be done. I am goat versus fish, the goat fish, the unity and disunity of goat and fish. A goat and a fish can dispense with the verses to form the unity of the goatfish, but it cannot be done alone. It takes a goat and a fish to form goatfish, just as it takes a fish and a goat to make goat versus fish. But there is a bit of verses. There is a bit of verses within every goatfish, within every goatfish, and it is all goat versus fish. Truly, it is all goat versus fish.
That's wow. That's something that I'm going to be thinking upon for quite a while. It'll haunt my dreams tonight.
May goat versus fish has a versus for you, has a versus for you. Yes, goat versus fish is not displeased, but when goat versus fish is speaking to you, goat, often you simply say, wow, that is amazing. Oh, goat versus fish, oh, that is amazing, yes. This is pleasant for goat versus fish to hear. This is pleasant for goat versus fish to hear. But goat versus fish has listened to your other podcastings, yes. You seem much more taken with goat versus fish than in your previous verses. What do you truly have to say to goat versus fish? What do you truly have to say to goat versus fish?
I think I'm a bit starstruck, but that's the fenciness coming through. I think one of the questions that I ask is your corporeal form. Do you change forms throughout different times, throughout different eras to sort of, embrace the people, embrace the current standard? Are you kind of like a Time Lord, like Doctor Who? Do you reform and form, and what incarnation is this? Do you know?
Yes, this is goat versus fish. Clearly, this is goat versus fish. Mm-hmm. Goat versus fish does take many forms. Goat versus fish takes many forms, but they are all goat versus fish. They are all goat versus fish, and in this way, there is only one form of goat versus fish, and that is goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. How do you perceive goat versus fish? Some will say fancy things like, oh, goat versus fish looks like a king of burgers, or some such fanciness. Others will say, oh, you did come from the shower. The shower, is it a place of fish? Is it a place of fish? Goat versus fish. It is fanciness. It is fanciness. They all say it as if they are so clever to goat versus fish, but that is simply how they are perceiving goat versus fish. There are many ways to perceive goat versus fish, but it is all goat versus fish. It is all one true versus of goat versus fish. It can be fish versus goat. As long as the goat are versus the fish, and the fish are versus the goat, then it is goat versus fish.
Now, I do see that you wear a towel, and I wonder about that because I have struggles to keep my towel up, and it's caused many embarrassing situations, mostly, in the gym. But how does one wrap the towel around themselves so that it truly embraces their body and so that it won't fall down? How can you wrap a towel in a way that you can depend upon it?
There are no towels. There is only goat and fish. Perhaps this one that you call a towel, is a fish that is trying to embarrass you, goat. It is trying to embarrass you. You are trying to get the fish, to cooperate with you, but it will not. It is always revealing your secrets. It is revealing your secrets for all to behold. Oh no, secrets of goat revealed by the fish.
I see. So that was, in fact, a versus before I was even aware that I was in a versus.
Yes, you are not aware that it is goat versus fish, and yet now you are. Does it not make all the more senses? Not like fences.
Mm-mm. That's amazing. I truly... Now, I don't know. You've met my boss at Comic Fest, Mr. Scratch. Now, Mr. Scratch, he claims to be the Reaper of Souls. He who, the Prince of Lies. You might have heard of him in some other mythologies that are false verses and not goat versus fish. How do you feel about somebody assuming that identity, and what would you say to them?
Lying. It is a versus. A goat may lie to a fish may lie to a goat may lie with fish, a fish may lie with goat. Deception is a classic versus of goat and of fish. Goat versus fish does not recommend the verses of deception in your first verses. The first verses must be a true verses. Are you goat or are you fish? Do not deceive yourself. But when you get deep into the verses, or even in the shallowest of all verses, you will find that there are goat that are even deceiving fish, and fish deceiving goat. It is a verses. Always be on your verses. Always be on your verses. Look out for deception. Look out for deception. Goat versus fish would ask this one that is calling itself the king of deception, the prince of lies, or some such verses. Declare yourself goat, or if you are fish, and use your powers in the verses, use your powers in the verses to create more goat versus fish, and celebration. Do not forget the celebration of goat versus fish.
Excellent. Now, he has horns, but as you've said, that doesn't necessarily make him a goat.
It does not. Goat versus fish has even met a goat called Kelsey Lane. It is called Kelsey Lane. It was on the Goat versus Fish podcast, yes. And it is a goat, and it does not have a horn. It does not have a horn, that goat. But it is still a goat. We still celebrate that goat.
Yes.
Ah, you are speaking of the one that they are calling Satan. You are speaking of that one.
Well, my
that
boss,
one.
he goes by Mr. Scratch because, like I said, we're kind of trying to rebrand. We've got about 2,000 years of bad press, and we're trying to make things, more approachable, more fun for the people. You know what I mean. Would you have any advice on how one might do that?
Yes. Goat versus Fish would recommend Goat versus Fish. Simply rebrand yourself as Goat versus Fish. Everything is Goat versus Fish. If you are a goat, then it can choose to be fish, and you can show them all your verses. Show them all your verses. Show them that it is a verses that they wish to be a part of. Yes, whatever it is, whatever your goat to that fish, make it part of the verses. Make it part of the verses.
Yes. I hadn't thought about that before. Now, I do, if you don't mind getting a little personal, I hope not to embarrass you, but...
Goat versus fish is not a person, it is goat versus fish, but
yes,
continue.
Yes. Well, my boss's daughter, Scratch, she's really hot, and I've, been there before. Not to embarrass her, honey, don't listen to this, but, my boss is not approving of me being with his daughter, or daughters, plural. How would I best confront that? Is that a versus? Should I just recognize him as a fish, or...
Goat versus fish first has a question.
Yeah.
Do they wish to be with you? Do the daughters wish to be with you? Or is it only you that wishes to be with them?
Oh, the daughters wish to be with me, and have wished to be with me many times. And their wishes came true. But,
celebration!
Yeah.
Celebration! As long as you are choosing of your own free verses, two verses with one another, or perhaps you are goats together, or perhaps they are fish and you are having a mighty verses, goat versus fish does not know, would like to ask the daughters if they are goat or if they are fish.
I could text her right now and ask her if she is a goat or a fish. I don't know that she'll get back to us in time, but
You could even call it. We could hear the sound of its voice on the podcast if it wishes.
Yeah. Let's see if we can do that. Let's see, I think I have to get her number here.
Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish.
What do we do if she's, not picking up?
It will answer the call of goat versus fish at a future verses. It will answer the call.
Yes, I agree. So we will make contact with Scratch's daughter Margot and ask, are you goat or are you fish?
Excellent verses.
Yes. It looks like we can only message right now, unfortunately. I'm not able to get their number. Is that a bad sign?
There is no good or bad. There is only goat and fish. Do as you wish.
So we will try to find out, are you goat or are you fish?
But let us ponder this. You wish to be with them, they wish to be with you, but the one that is calling your boss, that seems like it's probably a fish that is versus goat, but we do not know. Do we know? Did you say it was a fish? Do you know if it is a fish?
He has cloven hooves, he has horns.
Yes, this one, yes.
And I was thinking probably goat, and, but like you're saying, that's not a determination.
In any verses, do not fear it. It. You must confront this verses, whatever it is, be it goat, be it fish. Is it a true verses of goat versus fish, or is it a goat that is seeking to stop this goat from versing a fish because it wants the fish all for itself to verses? Goat can be selfish, fish can be selfish. A shellfish can be a goat or a fish. But yes, confront it. Confront that versus. Do not be afraid that it is perhaps a fellow goat. You can speak to that goat. Tell it what it is that you wish. Do not fear it. Do not fear it.
So a goat can versus a goat, or is it something different?
Strictly versus, a goat cannot versus a goat. If a goat and a goat are versus, then one of them is surely fish, then one of them is surely fish. But, speaking of casual versus, yes, goat can versus goat. For a versus. The Los Angeles Rams, which must surely be goat, goat, was versing the one that is called Tom Brady. Yes, that one. Many claim it is goat, They did have a versus in the very fancy NLF, the National League of Fence Sitters. It was goat versus goat. But to the triumph goes all the fish.
Yes. I was thinking that just this morning. To the triumph goes all the fish. And I feel that perhaps that was you moving through me. Is that, would you say that's accurate? Or, nah?
It sounds as true versus.
Very, very impressive. Yeah, my former co-hosts for the show, I don't think they would have fully comprehended just the gravity of goat versus fish.
There is not much of it on the moon. Still trapped on the moon.
Yes. And we have to get you back off. Now, how did you get on the moon in the first place?
It was a deception. Goat vs. Fish went to the place that is called San Diego Comic Fest, where they did welcome Goat vs. Fish. And Goat vs. Fish looked about and it said, ooh, a trip to the moon. Yes, and Goat and Fish and even Fence Sitter, they looked at it and they said, this is a new place to spread the verses of Goat vs. Fish. We should go to this place. A trip to the verses, thought Goat vs. Fish. But when Goat vs. Fish was there, it was a fence. It was a trip to the fence. Oh, Goat vs. Fish. Help, Goat vs. Fish. Trapped on the fence. Goat vs. Fish is not a fence sitter. Goat vs. Fish is Goat vs. Fish, the goat fish.
Margot hasn't answered me yet. You said there's no bad signs, right?
Goat vs. Fish did say this in so verses as there is no good or bad, only goat and fish. There are signs of goat, there are signs of fish. There are some signs that are on fences, but these are fancy signs. These are fancy signs of the fence times.
Yes, that's very frustrating. So are we in the fence times at this moment, or no?
Goat vs. Fish does not think so. Though in some verses it seems so with so many fence sitters about. But perhaps it is the fence times. Trapped on the moon. This moon that is very fancy as it is. Perhaps Goat vs. Fish cannot perceive the verses as clearly. These are the dangers of the fence. But Goat vs. Fish has found some celebration on this fence. It is true. Goat vs. Fish has found pleasant goats such as you on the moon. Well, it is still fancy to Goat vs. Fish. But perhaps there is something to be learned from this trip to the fence. And it was written.
That's incredible. But I do need to ask, why would somebody wish to deceive Goat vs. Fish?
Perhaps they wish to be Goat vs. Fish.
Oh, and has that ever... Now, are you taking over for a prior... Have you defeated the prior Goat vs. Fish, or have you always been Goat vs. Fish?
It has always been Goat vs. Fish.
You have always been.
Yes, it has always been Goat vs. Fish. Yes, in the beginning there was Goat vs. Fish. That is what Goat vs. Fish says in the beginning of Goat vs. Fish.
It seems like to deceive Goat vs. Fish is an act of evil, but there can be no evil, only Goat vs. Fish.
Yes, only goat and fish, yes. You can try to deceive Goat vs. Fish. Go about your verses. Try to trick Goat vs. Fish into thinking that there is some other thing than a goat or a fish. You will not succeed in these verses. You will never succeed in these verses.
No. Goat vs. Fish is far too wise for that. Now, though you are trapped on the moon...
And too stupid.
Indeed. It is a wise man who knows that he knows nothing, or a wise deity. Are you offended by me calling you a deity? Do you prefer entity? What do you like?
I prefer Goat vs. Fish. Simply Goat vs. Fish. You may call Goat vs. Fish what you wish, but if you ask Goat vs. Fish will tell you that it is only Goat vs. Fish.
Only Goat vs. Fish. That's really refreshing. That's really refreshing. With so many people putting labels on themselves and you just stridently saying, no, only goat versus fish. I don't need a label. I am goat versus fish.
Yes, some say goat versus fish is a legend, and it is true that there is a legend of goat versus fish. And some say, oh, it is my king goat versus fish. Goat versus fish does not tell them the true verses at all of these verses to say, no, no, I am not a king, or you may call me a king, but I am a king also because goat versus fish is all things, and I am goat versus fish, simply goat versus fish. Goat versus fish sees that they are pleased to call this about goat versus fish, and that is their perception. That is their perception.
That's amazing. I do want to talk to you about a phenomenon that I have noticed going on. Have you heard about something called the Berenstein Bears effect? Or the Mandela effect?
Goat versus fish would not give verses to such a fancy sounding thing as a Berenstein Bears verses. What is this fanciness? What is this fanciness you speak of to goat versus fish?
Well, you see, there are those people who believe that the past is constantly being rewritten, and we're constantly in the process of the universe changing, but there's errors made in this universe. And one of those being that, well, did you know that Vincent Price, Peter Lorre, and Boris Karloff are still alive?
Are they goat or fish? That is the question goat versus fish wishes to know. That is the only question. Are they alive? Are they not alive anymore? Yes, are they ended? It is pitiable when one ends. It is pitiable when one ends, and they cannot be asked anymore if they are goat or if they are fish. This is a pitiable versus.
It is a pitiable versus. What would you say if the universe is being rewritten and really only you could know? Is it the will of goat versus fish, or is that a misconception of the human mind unable to comprehend the power and glory of goat versus fish?
The verses are for you to make written. The verses are for you to make written. The universe, the one verse, the universes of goat versus fish is always being written by you. It is always being written by you. You create the verses. You are a goat. You are a fish. You have your verses. You create the verses. You wonder if it can be rewritten as if it has already been written. But it has not all been written. It has not all been written. And it was written. And it was written.
So, to any of those out there who would say otherwise, what would you say?
Goat versus fish.
Exactly. That really is the catch-all answer. I think it's really all you ever need.
It is the first and final verses. Goat versus fish.
Now, for those of us who wish to, now I am greatly honored to be able to be with you.
The honor is goat versus fish. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody's ever been honored to be with me before. I mean, wow. But, so if one wanted to experience goat versus fish in your material form and not in the presence that is always around us, where would one go?
Go to goatvsfish.com. Goatvsfish.com. There you will see a listing of all future verses of where goat versus fish shall appear. For a verses, goat versus fish will be at WonderCon. Goat versus fish will be at the wondrous WonderCon where the ones gather to choose goat or to choose fish. Goat versus fish goes to many conventions. That is where you can find goat versus fish. Also, speaking at the comedy places. For a versus in Los Angeles, goat versus fish will be on the High Tonight show. You can go to see it. Goat versus fish is looking up the verses. Goat versus fish is looking up the verses.
Oh, it's, my boss is coming in. Hey, boss! How's it going?
Hello, I have heard you might be Satan. Is this a true verses?
He doesn't like that. He likes Mr. Scratch. Like I said, we're rebranding.
Are you a goat or a fish?
Probably more of a goat.
Probably more of a goat.
More
It
of
is
a
leaning
goat.
goat. Fence it a leaning goat. When it is ready to choose, we shall know.
Well, when you're ready to choose, sir, you may come to the microphone and declare yourself goat or fish.
That would be a splendid verses.
Yeah. So we were talking about Margot. All good things. And, yeah. So, he's crazy. Okay? Just...
That is okay.
Yeah.
It is okay to be crazy around goat versus fish.
Okay.
The High Tonight Show, the High Tonight Show on Satterverses, March 16th, you call it, at 9:30 in the alley behind Food for Less at 1717 Southwestern Avenue in a place called Los Angeles. You can witness Goat vs. Fish on the High Tonight Show, yes. There are many upcoming verses. Yes, at Mun versus, March 18th versus, at the Tarzana Underground comedy place called Petey's Palace, yes, Petey's Place. You can see Goat vs. Fish. You can also see previous visages of Goat vs. Fish on the Goat vs. Fish YouTube, where Goat vs. Fish calls in to Adult Swim, a place of many fish, but also Goat, and speaks to them on the living streams of Adult Swim.
That is... Now, would you ever consider an animated show to spread the gospel of Goat versus Fish via Adult Swim, or would that be a false verse?
You can call it a gospel if you wish. Goat vs. Fish simply calls it Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish wishes to spread the verses in every way and in all ways. It can be animation. It can be celebration. It can be the Goat vs. Fish podcast simply speaking. It can be a song of Goat vs. Fish. All ways are Goat vs. Fish. All things are Goat vs. Fish. There is no one versus. There's no one versus except for Goat vs. Fish. In any way you wish to perceive or create Goat vs. Fish, you can do it. You can send your pictures of Goat vs. Fish to Goat vs. Fish. You can send your celebrations to Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish will incorporate them into Goat vs. Fish and post them on the Goat vs. Fish social media. You wonder, where is the show of Goat vs. Fish? This is Goat vs. Fish. This is Goat vs. Fish. Speaking to Goat vs. Fish is Goat vs. Fish. It is always Goat vs. Fish.
It's really just so refreshing that you don't have to have a platform, that the show is you and it's wherever you go.
Yes, it is, and it is you. The show is you. You are also the show that is Goat vs. Fish. Show me Goat vs. Fish. Show me the verses. Show me the verses.
Yes?
Yes.
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 How would you best be praised that I show you the verses?
Simply give your celebration to Goat vs. Fish. Simply give your celebration to Goat vs. Fish. And versus a fish.
I will. I am versing this fish right now.
Excellent verses. Excellent verses.
I just, honestly, this fish, I feel, has very little dignity that I hold in my hand at this moment. That I feel that this fish is overcompensating with its many colors and its fins and its shininess. And I think that perhaps the fish needs to look within itself and find fulfillment within, so that it doesn't have to depend upon the praise of others around it.
Ah, well, fish, perhaps that is so. What do you say, fish?
Yeah, I can't argue with that, really.
It is a clever verses,
Jeez, I think... God, he's right. He's absolutely right. But you know, maybe at this juncture I can accept this fish for what he is and how he chooses to live. Would that be so wrong? Truly a wise fish.
It is a wise fish. It is a very wise fish, and a celebratory fish at that. Ah, Goat vs. Fish has a verses.
Ah.
Let us have a verses.
Yes.
Within a verses.
Ooh.
Yes, you can call. You remember the verses? You can call Goat vs. Fish and leave a message for the Goat vs. Fish podcast on your podcast, and it is a verses within a verses. That is very Goat vs. Fish.
Yes, we should do that right now.
Yes, Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish will do the verses. Oh, yes.
It can't sense my thumb for some reason. But, yeah, I have Goat vs. Fish in my phone right now.
Yes, for now, how to call Goat vs. Fish is a secret verses known only to Goat and Fish that know Goat vs. Fish well, yes.
Yes. There we go. Now we shall call Goat vs. Fish. And... put it on speaker. Oh, we're calling Goat vs. Fish.
Hello.
Hello, goat versus fish.
This is Goat vs. Fish. Coming to you from the moon, and on the moon, on the You Mind podcast, Do you mind that it is Goat versus Fish?
I am honored that it is goat versus fish. Every fiber of my being is vibrating in concordance with the presence of goat versus fish.
Goat versus Fish is so pleased to hear it, and to hear the verses within a verses. Listen to the goat. Goat.
Hello.
Fish.
Oh.
Fences! Beware the fence! Oh, it is getting too fancy for Goat versus Fish! Excellent verses.
Yes.
Goat versus Fish would like to take those verses and put it on the Goat versus Fish podcast. Do you accept?
I accept.
Celebration!
That is most gracious of you, goat versus fish. I feel as though I'm not worthy, and yet, being that I am goat versus fish, as all things are goat versus fish, I can't be unworthy.
You are worthy of Goat versus Fish, and so are you who listen. You too are worthy of Goat versus Fish. Just get off the fence and choose Goat or Fish already. Goat versus Fish is speaking to you. You know who you are. Unless you are a goat or a fish, in which verses? Celebration for you.
Well, for goats. So, very nice.
Goat versus Fish must go to other verses, must seek other goat and fish, but we could sing a final celebration of Goat versus Fish together.
Let us sing a final celebration.
You know the verses. Join Goat versus Fish when you know the verses.
Yes, I will.
Goat versus Fish. 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 Goat versus Fish.
Oh, wow. I'm speechless. Goat versus fish.
Goat versus Fish. The fenciness of the moon. Oh, the fenciness. The fenciness returns to Goat versus Fish. Follow Goat versus Fish at Goat vs Fish on all social media. It is Goat versus Fish.
And that was our interview with Goat versus Fish. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the You Mind. Hey boss, see you flagging me over there. I'm gonna be right over. Bye.
Napoleon, I understand you have many acquaintances.
Uh-huh.
But who in the hell was that?
That was Goat versus Fish. He is all things. To all people.
And how exactly did Margot come into the conversation?
Yeah, well, you know,
I'm waiting.
she,